Hey, what's going on, everybody? Welcome back to the Six Rings King Show, joined here by Paul Austria, Danny Gillette, and of course, special guest from the Athletic, Manny Navarro, Jazz Santana. Thank you, Manny, for joining us on the show today. Appreciate it.
Hey, no problem, man. Thanks for having me on, guys.
Yeah, you got it. A lot of things to go over, obviously, with a lot of things going on in the offseason with Canes, with Manny Diaz doing his usual, big time moves that he's making. Obviously, a lot of us are talking about what's going on the defensive side of the football. New hire recently as well. Big time hire that I think all Canes fans are going to be excited about. Local guy, but also a great recruiter. And he's been in the SEC, which I know a lot of us want. That SEC caliber type recruiting and coaching. So some big news there. Some other news coming out on the defensive side of the football. And, of course, De'Aaron King coming out of the ACL surgery. He will be rehabbing. So, there's a quarterback battle behind him, right? Is it going to be TVD? Is it going to be Jake Garcia with N'Kosi Perry moving on and entering the transfer portal? So, and then we'll get into some national title talk also. I know we're Canes talk here, but we definitely want to talk some college football at the big game this Monday, and we'll get into that. So without further ado, Manny, big news coming out this past, within the last 24 to 48 hours with defensive backs coach Travaris Robinson making it official and joining the Canes football staff as the defensive backs coach, but also I believe he's co-defensive coordinator also. Talk to us a little bit about, what your thoughts are on that hire. I know that us three are pretty excited about it, but, definitely want to hear a little bit more about what you think about that hire.
Yeah, I reached out to a couple different people around college football to kind of gauge, their thoughts on what getting Travaris Robinson means for Miami. And, it's kind of a twofold response. I think some people think, okay, he's going back to what he's really good at, which is, coaching the secondary and recruiting. I think, his 5 years in South Carolina, as far as being a defensive coordinator, he got to the point in his career where he wanted to try to be the primary play caller. And obviously all these guys, that's what they want. They want full control of the defense. But the results weren't necessarily great. South Carolina, if you look at some of their defensive numbers the last couple of years, they struggled. And, T-Rob, I think, took that challenge on head on. And, he's always recruited more than just guys in the secondary. He's always recruited defensive linemen and linebackers and wide receivers and even offensive linemen he's helped bring to his programs. But I think in South Carolina, being in the SEC, it was a really tough challenge. So a lot of the defensive numbers aren't great for the Gamecocks the last couple of years. But as far as what he's good at, which is coaching defensive backs and recruiting that position in particular, I think it's a home run hire for Manny Diaz because, there are a lot of times Travaris Robinson was going head to head with Miami for a lot of guys here in South Florida. And he was winning a lot of those battles in Dade and Broward County from when I remember being as heavily involved in recruiting as I was back when I was with the Miami Herald years ago. And, he's always been a very, very good recruiter. He just has a very good bond with kids. And I think from that perspective, he's great. Now, to me, there's always two tiers to being a good recruiter. It's identifying talent and projecting it to the next level. And then there's the relationships. And I think his strength is really relationships. Identifying talent, he's okay at that. But I think, Miami fans have to realize and look at his history, look at his track record and say, okay, this is what they're getting. It's a big name. It's a guy who's had a lot of success. He's coached in the SEC. And I think really his strength is going to be getting Miami into states like South Carolina and Georgia. And as you mentioned, places in the SEC where they haven't had a lot of success. I think now with T-Rob, they can go into some of those schools and potentially win some battles beyond the secondary. I'm talking about any position because he's the kind of coach that can recruit any position.
Yeah, I mean, and real quick before we get to Paul and Danny, I think the biggest thing that I think was important this year and just in the past few years with that position also is the development of the players themselves, right? So you can get in as many 4- and 5-star guys as you want, but if you don't develop them, then you're going to get situations where they're going to transfer out. They're not, we're not going to have a depth at that position, things like that. What does he bring from a developmental standpoint? Can he develop these cornerbacks as well?
Yeah, I mean, look, it's a tough job. I mean, there's a lot of players out there every single year, and it feels like more and more guys are getting 4- and 5-star ratings than maybe they should. And so they come in, I think, with some expectations that are probably a little bit unfair. So I think we need to stop looking at the star system and saying, okay, that's the be-all, end-all. If a guy's a 4-star and he doesn't live up to it, he's a failure. No, I just think some guys probably are getting rated a little too high. But as far as developing guys, look, he's had success. He's put guys in the NFL. You look at some of the guys that he's recruited here in the past at Florida. Obviously, Vernon Hargraves was a 5-star kid who everybody knew was a can't miss prospect. He developed him. Keanu Neal, who's been in the NFL now for several years, was another guy he recruited there that had success. But he's had other guys that didn't have as much success that were very highly recruited. So I think he's just like everybody else in terms of, to me, it's really on the players, because I feel like the coaches do a good job teaching them what they're supposed to be taught. I just think sometimes the players, for whatever reason, maybe it's distractions off the field, maybe it's, that they're just weren't a very focused kid to begin with. They don't take their game to the next level. And the one thing I will say about Travaris from talking to his high school coach, I actually called his old high school coach, Joe Montoya, who coached Frank Gore and Jonathan Vilma. It was high school. He coached Travaris at Coral Park. And Joe was just saying, from the get-go with Travaris, he was a guy who was in the film room, bringing teammates with him into the film room to study with him and, to learn and to grow as players. And I think, any coach can teach kids everything. They can sit there and go over what they need to learn. But if the kids aren't willing to learn it, then it's not going to work out. So I think as long as Miami continues to recruit the kind of leaders that they have on that side of the ball, like a guy like Bubba Bolden, who's obviously very, very hungry, they get more guys with that kind of character, they're going to have more success. But I think, to put it all on coaches and development, I think it's a two-way street. I think the players have to do their part as well.
Yeah, I agree. Paul, you got anything there?
No, I totally agree with Manny. I think when you bring up culture, especially, you always wonder why Alabama always brings in all these kinds of guys year in, year out. And it's because Saban, pitches the culture of perfection. They always demand perfection. All your habits have to be on point. You can't afford to slack. And it's basically like either you could take this or roll with it if you want to play in the NFL, or you can go somewhere else, I guess, be a star. But will you really be as developed, not even just as a player, but as a man? And I think that's one thing to take into perspective. And I think, going back to the Robinson hiring, I think it's definitely huge for Miami just because, it's the local ties. Obviously, he went to Coral Park, and I know he's definitely related well to recruits and players. I think I saw it on Twitter that Amon Richards brought up an anecdote where I think when he was being recruited by Robinson, I think he was at South Carolina at the time. He did mention him talking smack to Amon. I think it was like a kind of like a receiver DB battle. Like, I could probably handle you, something along those lines. But I think that's the kind of guy that he is, and I think that for even just looking at the recruits he's brought into South Carolina and Florida, these are big names. Like Manny brought up Hargreaves. He brought in Tease Tabor to Florida. One notable name that I caught was Jordan Bush, who was the second best defensive tackle in the country last recruiting cycle, and they were fighting almost every big school in the country for him. Like, and that was to keep him home. And to me, that's it's not any, and it's hard to. You got to imagine this kid's probably hearing from Bama, Ohio State, the Clemsons of the world, and to keep him in South Carolina is huge. And I think this will bode well for Miami recruiting also, just that, we've definitely seen our fair share of not even just Florida DBs, but just South Florida DBs leave the area. I mean, Miami lost out on guys like Tyreek Stevenson, Tyson Campbell, Patrick Surtain. And I'm not going to say, they're like, Surtain definitely made a great decision by going to Alabama. Like, you can't blame him for that at all. But you got to imagine that he definitely builds.
He's going to help keep those guys home. I would assume
he's going to build a lot of momentum on the recruiting front for them, and just also it's nice also to have for Miami for their recruiting for their coaching staff to have a lot of South Florida based coaches. Like, they know the area. You've heard it plenty of times where, in reality, Miami doesn't even need to recruit nationally. There's plenty of talent down here. Like, even the 2- and 3-star players down here are great, and they probably only look like 2- and 3-star players just because they're playing in the middle of so much competition down here. There's so much competition in Broward, in Dayton, even in Palm Beach. So you got to imagine that, And Manny has a point too. Like I was looking at his rankings as a defensive coordinator, and I think this past season they were like in the hundreds and like points allowed, even yards allowed. And I think I mean I'm curious to see because I've seen I think some sources have reported that he's going to be a co-defensive coordinator. Um, I mean I don't know who that is, and plus with the whole Baker situation, I don't want to dive
Yeah,
too
but
deep
the
into
thing
that.
is, who's the other co? Who's the other co, right?
Yeah, so I mean, hopefully, if he is given a smaller responsibility of just coaching uh, the corners and the safeties, then I feel it's definitely going to be an easier job. And plus, I mean, I don't want to downplay or not downplay, but like talk down on AC competition, but it is going to be definitely a little bit easier on them, for just to handle this job.
Manny, what year was T. Rob? What year did he play at Coral Park? Do you know? Do you remember?
I know he didn't get to Auburn until like 98, 99. So it was like 95, 96, 97, 98, I think is when he was at Coral Park with Joe Montoya. And I graduated 96. So he was around the time. I mean, I'm 42. I think he's 39. So he's 3 years younger than me. But yeah, I mean, I think his final year at Coral Park was 98. And then, he was at Auburn in 99.
So he was there. I was in high school at that time too. So he was there with Keenan Longhorn and that guy, those kids, right? Was there at that time?
Was Keenan back then at that point? I can't even remember, man. There's so many kids in my name that are covered from Dade and Broward County over the years.
We're dating
it's
ourselves.
A long Rolodex.
I hate to date ourselves, but it isn't. I went to South Miami, so I was there with the Keno Mikes, Keenan Longhorn at Coral Park, Frank Gore at Coral Gables. So I got to see a lot of good running backs back then. And T. Rob was part of that team over there in Tropical Park. Though Tropical Park, listen to me. Well, they did play up there at Coral Park. That played. They had a pretty good team. So that's cool. Let's jump over because I know that we've got some questions on what's going on. Still the defensive side, but which, by the way, Manny Diaz again, right, starting to do a really good job of making the changes that he needs to make in the offseason, right? We still need to see it translate. Obviously, we saw it on the offensive side of the football a little bit this year with Rhett Lashley and the guys that he brought in with Likens and Justice and all these guys. But now it's time for the defensive side of the football to make some changes, and I think we've been saying that for a couple of years, but defense was okay, half decent last year, and this year we started seeing a little bit more of a breakdown on that side of the football for whatever the reason was. We're starting to get more information now that Coach Pat Key looks like he's out the door, and someone reported, whether it's legit or not, Manny, maybe you can touch on this. Coach Baker also looking elsewhere. He should start looking elsewhere, quote unquote, for a different position. What's the latest on those guys? Is there some front runners on the defensive side that maybe you're hearing about? I know we're hearing Coach Partridge, even bringing it back to Kevin Patrick. Someone noted here, Chris Wilson, the D-line coach. What are you hearing on that set? And what's your thoughts on it? Right?
Yeah, I mean, I think everything is a fluid situation. I know that obviously Manny's been exploring different possibilities of what he's going to do. It all started off obviously with Coach Banda going to Utah State and taking that job, and then we heard, I know from speaking directly to some of the coaches on the staff, that Mike Rumpf was told he was going to be reassigned somewhere at Miami. And then, the word has been that, as far as their defensive line coach, that he was going to not be coaching on the field next season. So that's where everything was left. I'm always cautious when I say people were fired, because that's a big deal. You don't just report that, especially for somebody like me. Everybody, when I say something like that, then it kind of like spreads fast. Same thing with Barry Jackson and the other reporters. So I know there's going to be a lot of chatter, and we obviously look into things to confirm it. And a lot of times, I can tell you the situation is fluid. Sometimes guys are told something and then it changes 5 minutes later, 10 minutes later. For a while, I thought DeMarcus Van Dyke might be coming back, to the staff, even though it was announced that he was going to be going to Utah State. They still hadn't even announced the hiring. So all these things are very, very fluid in coaching. A lot of times you have conversations and things can change based on who's coming and who's not coming. So all I know is that the safe way to assume this is Manny Diaz is retinkering his entire defense. Yeah. And Travaris Robinson was hired to come in and help fix the secondary and be the DB's coach. I know he's listed as defensive coordinator as well, but I don't know exactly what that means for Blake Baker, and are they going to hire somebody to coach the front seven? Is there going to be sort of a different responsibility? None of that we really know for sure. I think it's a very fluid situation. So What I would tell you is I know that they've been interviewing defensive line coaches. I know that I've reported some of the names for the Athletic. I know Charlie Partridge is somebody that his South Florida ties, the way that he's developed guys and put guys in the NFL and recruited over the years. I would say he's one of the candidates for that position. And we'll see. We'll see what Manny ends up doing. I'm very cautious because, again, these are people's jobs and their lives. And so when I say something, I know it can be
absolutely.
it can take on a whole nother life of itself, whereas somebody else who maybe doesn't have to answer to criticism can be a little bit looser with their lips.
Yeah, it'll spread like wildfire. The minute Manny says something, it's retweeted 1,000 times. We get that. I and the reason I say it is because I know that Tim Reynolds tweeted something about that there's kind of be some more changes coming out soon, and I think we all kind of have that feeling and realize that that's going to happen anyways. It's just a matter of not, like you said, not putting out their names or hinting at certain things without knowing for sure what's going to happen. So, and I totally get that. We've had that situation before here, and I'm sure I mean, we work with Ethan, so Ethan doesn't like to put anything out that's not legit anyways, and we don't like to do that either, to just to make sure that we respect everybody's life, I guess, right? Not only job but everybody's life. So and listen, we're happy for Coach Banda. I think it's a well-deserved move for him to make that move and go over to Utah State. Took Zuckerman over with him as well, so that's kind of cool. But obviously that came out with Coach Stroud not probably not going to be coaching the defensive line. So I know there's a lot of Canes fans and others out there that are excited to see if we bring back a guy like a Kevin Patrick or, someone like that. Although, and Manny, maybe you can give me your take on this. I don't necessarily need to see former Miami Hurricane players or coaches come back again and coach this team. I'm not saying that I'm not high on Kevin Patrick. I mean, he's a good defensive line coach, but I want to see guys that maybe are coaching at the SEC level, or maybe are coaching some other, really solid teams, and maybe this is a step up for them. Is there something you want to see out of this defensive line, or just the defense as a whole do better? And obviously we can think of other coaches that can probably bring that in. But what do you want to see out of this defense next year?
Well, I mean, like everybody else, you just want to see them play better. The North Carolina game notwithstanding, there were other moments throughout the season where they gave up a lot of points to some average quarterbacks. I mean, I think the NC State game is a great example. As good a receivers as NC State may have, to give up 41 points in that game and get shredded by essentially the backup quarterback wasn't very good. Obviously, Oklahoma State, the first quarter, 21-0. I mean, those are the kind of things that are sort of inexcusable in my mind. And I think, one thing people have done automatically is just point the finger at Blake Baker and say, well, it's all him. Ever since, Manny stopped calling the plays, he's the problem. Well, I tend to put a couple of factors out there. One, I think Manny had some better players when he was coaching the defense. He had 11 guys that were drafted in the NFL, and Baker, is going to have some first-round picks at defensive end that have played for him. And he had Shaq Quarterman last year, but I think the secondary play in particular, the safety play, really dropped off this past season. Maybe some of that had to do with Ephraim Banda not being around because he was sick, dealing with the COVID pandemic, and there were other issues. But the bottom line is they just didn't perform to a high level. I did an article for The Athletic yesterday that came out yesterday, sort of comparing the play calling between Baker and Diaz. And, Diaz's whole mantra is play man to man, right? But, go up there, put pressure on the quarterback, create negative plays. Well, they played more zone than they have all season long, or all, since Manny Diaz arrived 5 years last year. And so part of that was personnel, and part of that, I think, was strategy. I think part of that was Blake Baker thinking we're going to play zone against Oklahoma State and the results are going to be good, and they weren't. And so that you can blame him for, certainly. But again, all of this to me is about getting back to a national championship level. And it starts with recruiting. It starts with getting, the Leonard Taylors and the James Williams and the best of the best that come to Miami. And I know, Paul, you said earlier the Miami-Dade is full of talent. Yes, it is full of talent in terms of putting guys in college and Division I scholarships. But look, as a guy who's covered South Florida for 25 years now, and followed the recruiting scene, maybe not as tight as some of the guys from 247 Sports do all the time, or Rivals, but certainly Dade and Broward. I can tell you there's a lot of guys who have come out that have been overrated, that have not gone on to college and done a lot of great things. They've been disappointments, and they've ended up transferring or going somewhere else. So, we can sit here and say, hey, just get all the best South Florida talent and you're going to win. And I think I've said that in the past, but I've learned over time, studying this and getting to see guys and watching them up close. To me, it's the can't miss guys. It's the 5-star guys that you got to get. Those are the guys that really make the difference. As I said earlier, there's a lot of guys that I think are being overrated coming out of high school. I think they're focused on the wrong things. You see them posting things on social media all the time, trying to get followers, trying to get people to, and that's not what this is about, right? It's about being the best player you can be. And so I think the key thing for Manny Diaz and for whoever runs this defense going forward is you recruit the right kind of players to play in your defense, and you just coach them the right way. Let them play man-to-man. Let them go after the quarterback. Let them do the things that they do best. And so that's what I want to see here in the next couple of years. I want to see them get to that. And I think most of the former players that I talk to, that's all they want to see. The guys who won championships at Miami, who look at this defense and criticize it and say this and that. It's just not as talented as it used to be, and they haven't developed players as well as they needed to. And part of that is identifying the right guys.
Two things I want to bring up that you mentioned, Manny and Danny. I'll get to you. I know you got a couple things, but two things I want to mention. Number one, and you've been covering them for 25 years, and I think I've said this a lot on our shows, is some of the best players to ever come out of Miami are not local guys. Most of them are from California or Texas, Louisiana. You get some from Georgia. The Ed Reeds of the world, the DJ Williams, the Kenny Dorsey's, all these guys. A lot of them didn't play in South Florida. So, and whether it's, that they get coached up a lot better or whatever the case is, I just feel like, like you say, you just got to go get the can't miss guys, no matter where they're from. And if you have a chance to get them, absolutely. But on the same token, there's no secret about it. If you look at, the top 4 teams that are in the college football playoffs, right, their teams are loaded with 4- and 5-star guys. So you got to get those guys, right? Yes, a lot of them are overrated, and they weed themselves out eventually sometimes. But you got to go and get those 4- and 5-star guys, no matter what, wherever they're from. I don't care where they're from. Evaluate. You got to do a better job of evaluating players, and then you got to go out and you got to get them. So, I mean, we'll see what happens. Danny, you got some thoughts?
Yeah, Manny brought up the fact that Robinson was very active in the film room as a coach, and that is something that I think is extremely important, especially when you look at the secondary. Last year, we complained a lot about the secondary not looking for the ball or getting burned on this particular coverage, and instilling that kind of discipline is going to be huge for the secondary. I'm curious to see how the secondary itself develops and if they can kind of clean up some of the mistakes as a unit that they made last season. I mean, they played good in some stretches, but other stretches they looked completely lost. And I'm interested to see if that kind of discipline that Robinson brings to the table will kind of rub off on the unit to create a more refined product in the secondary.
Yeah, I think just to answer that really quickly, I think you hope so, right? That's what he's supposed to do as that kind of a coach. I mean, I think the one thing I will say, I think his experience as defensive coordinator, even with his struggles, I think that helps coaches get better. Like Garen Justice was a head coach at the Division III level, and then an offensive coordinator at UNLV. Rhett Lashley being at all the places he's been as a coordinator. You're essentially getting the same thing with T-Rob. Rob Likens, another one, the receivers coach. He was an offensive coordinator at Arizona State. I think the more experience you get, the better coach you end up getting. And so from that perspective, as far as a guy who knows what it takes to win, he knows. And T-Rob was part of a staff at Florida in 2013 that or actually 2012, where they won 11-2. And then the next year they went 4-8, but his secondary was still among the best in the country. So to me, I think that just shows you what kind of a coach you're getting, a guy who, even when the team isn't necessarily playing well, his guys at least keep playing for him.
Could you see, and Jock brings this up in the chat, which is always a great question and something that he brought up that I think makes sense. Maybe some of these guys on the offensive side of the football, particularly one D Wiggins, who played a lot of defensive back in high school, and from his film that he's seen, he says he may be a better defensive back than he was a wide receiver. Could you see a guy like that, or maybe somebody else on the team moving over from the offensive side of the ball to the defensive side of the ball, especially now with T-Rob coming in? Does D. Wiggins maybe look at making a move? Does he want to? What do you think about something like that?
Yeah, I don't know. That's a good question. Manny has moved as far as moving guys around and making drastic changes. I mean, it's not something that's happened a ton under him as far as switching from offense to defense. That was something that happened a couple of times, I think, with Mark Richt with a couple of players and certainly other coaches in the past. But, Manny has talked about, everybody has to be capable of playing multiple positions, right? He said that at the beginning of this year because of what was going to happen with COVID. But I think, for a guy like D. Wiggins to make that transition now in his final year, I don't know. I don't know that he's capable of honestly being able to make that switch. Same thing with a guy like Mark Pope. Obviously, I think it's a little easier to go from from wide receiver to cornerback than vice versa. But in this case, I think of a guy who's done it. Sam Shields, I guess, is the one that comes to mind right off the bat. A guy who went from wide receiver to corner and had success. But Sam is a guy who always sort of had those skills and was capable of it. I just don't necessarily see it with D or Mark Pope.
Yeah, good. Yeah, that's true. And one more thing, right? Before we let you go, I think the big question mark, I think, surrounding the quarterback position now with D'Eriq King rehabbing, saying that he will be ready for the opener with Alabama, and God knows what's going on with COVID, that situation and all that later on down the line. But as it stands right now, the Alabama game is at the beginning of September. D'Eriq King's rehab is 6 to 9 months now with an ACL. I know that, the way these doctors operate and kids now, rehabbing and all that could speed up the process, and he could be ready for that September game. But, with N'Kosi Perry transferring out, and now it's really up to Tyler Van Dyke or Jake Garcia to kind of come in and battle it out for that number 2 spot. What do you see? Talk to us a little bit about what you see there. Does TVD, does Jake Garcia have a legitimate shot at beating TVD, or if it comes down to that, one of those two has to start against Alabama? What do you want to see at the quarterback position there?
Yeah, it's an interesting situation because I think Jake Garcia was hopeful he would make it in for spring football, but I know that it's still a process, and he's a guy who's, played obviously for 5 different high schools here. And when you have those kind of transcript issues, it could be troublesome as far as being able to get into UM on time. So I know I haven't reached out to his father since I wrote the article a couple of weeks ago for The Athletic, but I know that it was sort of a work in progress, of getting all the paperwork necessary. They were optimistic it would happen, but I think Rivals or Kane Sport might have reported that, it's not 100% done deal for him getting in the spring. So if he doesn't get in, that's going to mean a lot of reps for Tyler Van Dyke, obviously, and Peyton Matoka, who's still at Miami. So I think, you're in a situation where, both of those guys could benefit from it. And, to me, I look at it, there's going to be more guys that don't get in this spring. I know Leonard Taylor's one of them. The receiver from Palmetto, whose name escapes me now because I've heard it 1,000 times. What's his name again? Rashard Smith. Yeah, sorry. I think all of those guys, because of what's happened with the COVID pandemic and taking online classes to try to graduate early, it's made things really tough. So from that perspective, there's a chance you may not get Jake Garcia. Either way, I think it's a good thing that, when you go into spring football, the young guys are going to take the bulk of the snaps because we know what D'Eriq King can do. We know he has a full grasp of this offense. This isn't an important year for him as far as development. I think, it's a kind of year where he could rehab, refocus, and come back and be healthy in time and have a really great season. So the bulk of the snaps will go to the young guys. I think, again, this is just my opinion. I think Jake Garcia, having played in California and Georgia, 2 legitimate high school football states where you have top-end talent, I think it gives him somewhat of an advantage. He's been in really big games, really tough games. Tyler Van Dyke was great, but he played in Connecticut in a prep school and in a school that, yes, it's produced, a few NFL guys, but it's not the same level of competition in my mind. And where Tyler Van Dyke has the advantage is he's been here a year already, right? He's learned the offense for a year. He knows what he has to do. Jake hasn't had that opportunity yet. But as far as who's ready, mentally to play in big games like in Alabama, I would say Jake. My gut tells me Jake is probably a little bit more prepared just because he's, played in big games. And Tyler, I think, is just it's at a different level. So, the Peyton Matoka thing is interesting. I don't know if he's going to enter the transfer portal, go somewhere else, but certainly, he's the guy who's been here for 2 years now and was brought in with Dan Enos. If it's him, if Jake Garcia doesn't get in and it's him and just Tyler getting all the snaps, maybe that keeps him around for another year, where he's competing. I don't know what he can honestly offer. I know he's an athletic quarterback, but he's not as highly touted as the other two guys. So we'll see what ends up happening here. I think we're going to see more action in the transfer portal here in the weeks to come. I feel like I got to check it every single day. I'm messaging coworkers who have access to it at the Athletic and like, can you check for me? Is there another Miami guy in there today? It's a busy time of year. And so a lot of things, as I said, are very fluid right now, but I think Miami's in a good position for next year, to be honest. I do. I think Manny, the one thing he's shown you over and over again is he's willing to make changes, right? He's willing to address things right away and not let it continue. Whereas we've seen coaches here in the past, Al Golden, they kind of keep their buddies around.
Why did you even mention his name, man?
And they don't really make changes. And so, I think the hiring of Robinson, we'll see what other parlaying moves are included in all this. But, I think it's a step forward in terms of, hey, we didn't get the results we wanted. We want better recruiting at that position. And let's see what he does.
Yeah, I mean, and like you said, still some really good talent in the transfer portal, like the kid Rambo from Oklahoma and some other guys that are still out there. And obviously there was talk of Tyreek Stevenson, although I don't know if he's hit the transfer portal or not, but that's a guy that seems to be disgruntled over at Georgia. Who knows with these kids anymore? But
yeah, they change high schools like crazy. They're going to change colleges like crazy. It's just the way it is.
I know. And someone mentioned that, we can't live off of the transfer portal. No, you're right. We can't. But we've had such good, I don't want to say luck. We just been
success.
Really good in the success is a good word. Yeah, that's a good word. Success in the transfer portal that you can't stop going to that well. You got to, because you're going to get Quincy Roches and you're going to get, Jalen Phillips and guys like that. You're going to get those guys and you can't stop going to that well because, with a young team, sometimes building depth, you need to go to the transfer portal. So I'm all for it. Thank you, Manny, so much. I know you gotta run, but thank you so much for joining us. You can find Manny. You can find Manny Navarro's work on the Athletic and on Twitter also at Manny Navarro. I believe I got that right? At Manny Navarro.
Yeah, at Manny_Navarro.
Manny
on Twitter.
There we go, man. Yep. Thank you so much again. We appreciate it, and hopefully we'll have you on again soon, man.
All right, guys. Thanks for having me. Take care.
Thank you, bud.
Take care.
There's over
700 players in the transfer portal, I think. I think that's the number.
Yeah,
it's insane.
So more players than positions available than spots open.
Yeah.
And I think someone said that earlier. So
it's weird just because I don't think NCAA has really changed the rule on taking in 25 players per cycle. So it's just it's even if let's say Miami does lose a player to the transfer portal, like N'Kosi Perry. That they can't go and say, oh, we have a spot open in our class. No, it's still a set 25. Find a way to replace. That to me is such a weird, especially with COVID now. Guys are going to want to be closer to home, or they just want a new environment, so on and so forth. Just because it's throwing everything off mentally. It's I don't know. It's a lot of observation. I think a lot of assumptions have been made, some players are running from competition, stuff like that. I don't like speculating like that. I don't know. It's a weird year with the transfer portal.
Okay, but now that Manny's not on anymore, because obviously he can't speculate on who he wants to be the defensive coordinator and all that shit, but we can. Okay, we can do it. I want to hear your takes. I want to start with Danny because I want to hear your takes on what you think, because for all intents and purposes, we know that Blake Baker's probably gone, right? Like, I know there's talk about it, him being gone, and Jonathan Patke being gone, and some of the other guys, and Coach Stroud, because of his health reasons, not going to coach again, which I don't think he did a terrible job, but I understand. I mean, health is more important. So, many blessings to him and his family, and hopefully he's okay. But what do you guys want to see? Danny, what do you want to see on the defensive side of the football? Do you have any names that maybe you're curious about, or maybe guys that you're like, well, shit, let's bring this guy in? What do you think?
Ooh, I don't really have any names. I have a specific style that I would want to see from the defense, which is more of a focus on rushing the passer and, like I said, improve secondary play. Less zone, I think, would be a huge.
Yeah. And Manny said it, though, right? Manny Navarro said it, that Manny Diaz used to play more of that man-to-man.
I
super
just want to
aggressive.
see a little bit more aggressiveness and a little less zone. I don't have any names. I'll have to start looking, but I would just really like to see a more aggressive defense, and a defense that can trust the secondary a little bit more. And I think Robinson, to kind of go back around on this, is going to help that.
He's a tough guy. He's he's in your face kind of guy. He's a good coach. He develops cornerbacks. Jock mentioned that. Jock, if you're still around, man, if you want to get on, pop on, man. But he mentioned that his corners in South Carolina were pretty good, right? And listen, we all know coaching the defense, the whole entire defense, and then coaching one specific position, two totally different animals, man. So where you could be super, super successful doing one thing, you could be mediocre doing another. And that's just the way it is. There's a lot of great offensive coordinators that, like, a perfect example in the NFL is in Norv Turner, great offensive coordinator. Just don't think he was that good of a coach, of a head coach, Same thing with a guy maybe like Dirk Cutter or something like that. Like those guys.
Rex Ryan on the defensive side of the ball.
Rex Ryan, I mean, look, he's getting another shot now, but Sarkisian over at Texas now, right? He's building a great staff, but he wasn't all that at USC, right? So is he going to be better now with Texas? I don't know. So you got to pick the right guys, and Manny's doing a great job of that. But at one point, we have to be like, okay, stop having to go get the right guys, and let's start having the right guys and win with the right guys for multiple years, right? You can't every year.
That's the culture in a program.
We're not Alabama that we can lose, Mario Cristobal and get a Lane Kiffin or Steve, whatever it is.
Yeah.
We were not yet, at least not yet. We have to get there sometime. That would be nice. Yeah. Paul, what do you think? What do you want to see on the defensive side? Who do you want? Because another thing, right? T. Rob is now defensive backs coach. He's the co-defensive coordinator, but we all know that you don't bring in a defensive backs coach and not make other changes. So other changes are coming. What do you want to see, Paul?
There's a lot of names. The guy from Pitt that you mentioned, was it Kevin Patrick, or was it was Partridge? I forgot the D-line coach of Pitt. Pitt's D-line was probably the second best in the country to Miami's.
Yeah, he's a legit.
And I think the fact that he does have, I think he's from Plantation originally, so he has very solid South Florida connections. I think he would be a great hire for the defensive line. I mean, I hope Coach Stroud, whatever he's dealing with, or if he is dealing with something, hopefully, he figures it out. But I think Partridge would be a great fit. I'm with Danny on this. I think that you want that tenacious, aggressive stuff from 2019, 2018, and Manny said too, in fairness, we can't compare this team to those teams just because that team, I think it was the 2018 team where they had multiple guys with 10 tackles for loss or more. That might have been both 18 and 19 now that I think about it. Right. With Jared Willis, who's the Joe Jackson, Quarterman, Pickney, all those guys. It's I don't know. It's more the Miami style. It was I remember just watching that team. We all know that when Enos was the offensive coordinator of those teams, the offense was really outside of that first drive against Florida, we were all what the hell for the rest of the year. We were what the heck is going on? And I remember thinking to myself, I'm thinking wow, I actually really like watching the defense more than I love watching the offense. The defense was way more entertaining to watch. And,
it was fun.
Yeah, like they're always aggressive. You on third down, they were gonna not only blitz, but I think I just remember with Manny Diaz's defenses where their blitzes were always hard to figure out. Like you think they're blitzing from one side because they're overloading it when really more of the pressure is coming on the other side. And it really made offenses like they had to really they had to prepare. I mean, maybe you could prepare, but you really weren't prepared. And I think that what Manny said too, like it's I don't know, because obviously we were wondering like the DB play this year was really, I guess, sus, just because like we were wondering like, oh, why aren't guys turning around? Why are guys just total like, like I know a lot of criticism have been thrown to Ivy and Blades, but I feel like they just weren't put in positions to succeed. Like I feel like a lot of times you saw Blades not turn around, but we could also say that maybe he was expecting the safety behind him to kind of take over, if they're going deep. There's just a lot of questions that we kind of had. And thing is, Miami has a lot of guys on defense, especially in their front seven, with especially a linebacker. Like, I mean, given they're all kind of young, I mean, they have Sam Brooks, Avery Huff, obviously on the
By the
defensive line.
way,
There's
we need to do better recruiting linebackers too, because I think
Mhm.
it's not a knock on Flag and Brooks and Huff and them, but I mean, we just need to look. Here's the thing, right? Like Robin Hollywood says that we don't have dogs on this team on the defensive side, and guys like Alabama and Oregon, let's be honest about something, right? When you look at a game, and you're going to see this game on Monday. You're going to see it on Monday, right? You line up, and we'll get into the national championship preview in a second. But you line up the guys on Alabama's defense or Ohio State's defense or whoever you want to line up, right? Clemson's defense, and those guys on that defensive side of the ball, they look like grown ass men.
Yeah.
They look huge. Like you look at, and on the offensive side also, look at Trey Sermon. If you look at Trey Sermon, he's like this.
Good luck tackling.
Yeah, he looks huge. And you're like, where's my running back that looks like that? And I think Don Chaney has a chance to be that guy. And I know he's young, and I know Trey Sermon's a senior, but forget about the senior thing. Najee Harris, as a freshman, looked like a senior running.
Yeah, in high school he's 6'2", 200. He's huge.
I mean,
but even when you look at these programs like Ohio State and stuff like that,
look at their linebackers. They look
like running back. Yeah, linebacker, running back.
Right?
Zeke was huge. Yeah, Zeke was huge. I remember watching him, and I was like, holy crap, this is a huge running back that's going to absolutely destroy defenders. It seems like they're always able to get that big and physical guy who also has a lot of speed. And then you talk about it defensively. I was watching the Ohio State Clemson game last weekend, and these guys were absolutely jacked. Like, granted, my doughy body isn't a fair comparison to all these guys, but they were absolutely huge. I mean,
ladies love that body, Danny.
Like grown men, like you're saying, they did look like grown men, and sometimes, or most of the time, actually, Miami's defense did not look like grown men. They looked like kids, and that's not necessarily a knock on them so much as just a testament to how well these programs like Ohio State and Clemson have been developing and recruiting.
Well, I mean, listen, I think we have more. We have some of those guys, right? We've got the Rousseaus of the world, and then you see Jalen Phillips, how he developed, and Roche, and then last year when you had Quarterman and you had Mike Pickney, they looked bigger, right? They looked, but they took some time to develop also, right? You got to start off even guy and Manny, you're here now, so I want to hear your take on this, because even the guys at Florida like Ventrell Miller and those kind of guys, those are big, solid linebackers, man. Like big guys already coming in, right? So you need those kind of guys to compete against the SEC type teams or the bigger teams or the Clemsons of the world, because those teams are going to wear you out after a while, right? The Travis Etienne's, Najee Harris will wear you out. Maybe you stop them for a couple quarters, right? You do well holding them down. But in the third and the fourth quarter, that 230-pound frame is going to run you over. He's going to wear you out. So I think David Philly does a good job of developing these guys, and I know we've only seen 1 year of him, but I just think that Manny, correct me if I'm wrong, you look at the players on the defensive side of the football, and even on the offensive side of the football, the wide receivers and the running backs for Miami don't look big, don't look what's the word I'm looking
Scary.
for? They don't look scary, right? They don't look
Menacing.
intimidating like maybe a guy on like a Kyle Pitts, or you line up a Justin, what's his name, Shorter or whatever. You know, those
Shorter,
Jacob Copeland,
Shorter,
those guys.
yeah.
You know, you don't see those guys on the offensive side of the football for Miami or on the defensive side of the football. I mean, you see them maybe more on the defensive side, right?
But no, and you actually make great points there. But I think what kind of helps Florida as well, knowing that they got to get those type of guys, is playing in the SEC, right?
Sure.
Because you know that the one game in your own division that you always want to win is Georgia. You win that game, Georgia, and then obviously, listen, there's always struggles against Kentucky. There hasn't been struggles against Tennessee, and it seems like 2 decades. So I'm not even going to put that team in there. But listen, Florida knows that you beat Georgia, and the only way to beat Georgia in the last 5-6 years is smash mouth football. You got to be able to get these guys that are, like Paul said, the guys in Miami are not scary. Well, these guys have to at least be athletic. They got to be big. And you even said it in the fourth quarter when, a game is on the line. And I'm going to steal a quote from Red Zone from Scott Hansen. To me, the fourth quarter in an SEC football game is the witching hour, where wins become losses and losses become wins. Why? It's the type of talent that you have out there in the fourth quarter on offense and defense. And that's the way that I think that the SEC has been able to outmanage the ACC, except you see what Clemson does, right? I truly believe that Clemson has an unfair advantage per se, because they play in a conference that, Florida State was getting there. They were getting there. Jimbo, there's no doubt about it, dude. Like Jimbo leaves Florida State, all of a sudden had an opportunity to go toe-to-toe with Clemson for years to come. He was building something, okay? And I'm sure that if Miami would have seen that, okay, you know what? we Clemson, whatever.
Right. Florida State, no.
Not right now.
It's true. And then you know what happens? You let it slip, and you let it slip, and you let it slide, and look at Clemson now.
And look where you are today.
And I get it. Matt Paris here wrote, don't forget the money bags. Yeah, okay. I get that. Yeah. A lot of these SEC teams do have more money, and we hate to say it.
Georgia.
I don't care what anybody says. Manny, I don't care what anybody says. Everybody does it. It's a matter of if you get caught or not. Simple as that.
Hey, listen. My future wife went to school at Florida State all 4 years, including the year they won the national championship. She was in a class with one of the most best running backs I've ever seen, and you guys can probably know who I'm talking about. The man literally showed up every single week in a different vehicle. Okay,
his first name start with a D and end with his
C.
With a C?
Yes.
I know who that is.
He showed up in a different vehicle every single week.
He
dated one of the walk-on players, and he'd come every week with go. Every single week. I mean, every school does it though. Every school does it though. The point is, if you're gonna do that, you have to win.
Yeah.
You can't be like my coach, right? Like Dan Mullen that gets caught, and yet you still can't recruit. You still can't recruit defensive linemen at Florida.
Somebody said to us that we should have hired Urban Meyer as our head coach, and then in basketball hired like Rick Pitino, and that we would have been the best teams in the country. and then somebody says, yeah, but you would have been hit with sanctions after 3 or 4 years. I go, yeah, but we would have won 3 or 4 national championships.
We would have felt good for 3 years. We would have felt good for 3 years.
We would have felt real good for 3, and I'll take that, man. I'll take that for like a 5-year.
You know what I mean? Like they caught USC, but yet what they took away the Heisman of Reggie Bush. They gave it back to him, but they didn't vacate the championship.
No.
Yeah.
Houston
Reggie was
Astros
fun as hell to watch.
Houston Astros got caught cheating.
Although we are the Hurricanes, so we'd probably get our we'd probably have to lose.
And then that's the thing, right? Because I you know what I'm saying? It's so unfortunate though that the NCAA does have a way of picking and choosing who they want to go visit, what sanctions they want to give out, when they want to give them out, when they want to tell you, hey, listen, this is your timeline, right?
And how harsh they want to be,
and how harsh they want to do it. I mean, listen, the only school in NCAA football history that I think got it right there where it hurts all of us is SMU. And it took SMU almost a decade
Look at Penn
Yeah, that's
State.
true.
Look at Penn State. How did Penn State not lose everything with
I
the
know.
whole entire
One of the
scandal?
most prestigious head coaches in this game. I don't know what's going on. Nah, Joe.
Come on, man.
It's
Come
bigger than football.
on.
It's bigger than football. It's
Yeah.
bigger than football.
Have
And
it in
yet,
your own facilities too. That's the
yeah,
scary part.
bro. If that was Miami, dude,
Forget about it.
Done.
Would be right now. We'd all be Gator and FSU fans probably. All right, let's go.
Yeah.
that's
Also,
the very
with-
unfortunate part.
Also with Reggie Bush too, and Reggie Bush, like you guys saw how good he was. Like to me, he
Oh, it was
kind of was
nasty.
worth the money. He was worth
Yeah.
the money. At
Yeah.
that point.
Yeah.
Like, I would have probably
Yeah.
would have paid him $100,000.
Yeah.
I don't know if I've ever seen anybody like Reggie Bush before. I really don't. I don't know at that
No.
position like what he did.
The way his speed of getting the football where he got it from and turning a corner or getting through the
Yeah.
gap when he saw a hole. I mean, that's why it worked so well to me. Well, it worked a lot more better in college than the NFL because the hatches are wider, obviously, right? So you got to move within it. In the NFL, they stay right in the middle. So obviously, the amount of yardage from the left hash to the sideline is not going to move the ball, right? It's either going to stay in the middle, But Reggie Bush, man, it's like you hear all these things. Oh, he got a house and he got phones. I'm like, hell yeah, I would have done the same thing too to make sure a top of player like that would have stayed in my school. And guess what? We won national championships. I don't feel bad anymore. The man was able to keep his Heisman. Okay, no offense. Despite him accepting gifts and whatnot, he busted his ass to win it, and I don't have an issue with that.
He was still as good as. I mean, he was still the best. So I don't care.
He was the best player. He was the best player on that field.
So,
dude, no offense. I think USC lost to Texas because I'm not giving the ball more to him. They gave it a lot to Lendell White. They wanted to play action a lot with Daquan Jarrett, I think his name was. But I think
Dwayne Jarrett.
Oh my
remember
God.
though, right? Bush made the stupid play of throwing the ball back when he had a clear field for a touchdown, I think it was, and he threw it back to a lateral.
Well, hold on. On the other side of the football, Vince Young had a couple. He probably showed up in different cars every day too. All right.
Yeah, true. Well, his knee was also on the ground on that pitch for the touchdown. I think, and I'm only talking about that specific game because I still think that USC should have won that one. That would have made it 2 in a row, right? I think it was. That would have made it 2 in a row. And you got all these sanctions and all these things happening, but you won 2 championships. Who cares? Take it.
Yeah.
Suspend all of us. Like Pete Carroll left to Seattle.
Yeah.
What the hell's gonna happen?
Yo, I'm screwed. Let me go to Seattle.
The only thing I hate, and the only thing I'll never agree on, is punishing the future athletes that go to this school that have been wanting to do this all their lives. They get punished for it. Yeah. That's my issue. And it sucks, right? Because when a player gets caught, normally they're in the NFL, but the school is still there. Obviously, you got to do something. I just feel like the players coming in that had nothing to do with it shouldn't be the ones punished.
It should be more maybe the coaches and
or somebody that was there before, or even the team president or the athletic director or something.
They're the ones that would happen. Yeah. So I know we went off on a tangent and we totally went off, but this all plays back into what we wanted to talk to, which was the national championship game, which is 2 juggernaut teams, Alabama and Ohio State, duking it out. Well-deserved victory for Ohio State. They caught Clemson slipping and they put a whooping on them, and it is what it is, and that whole talk about them being 6-0 only or 7-0. They showed you that they are one of the top teams in the country. I know that, we all agree that maybe they shouldn't have been there, but they're kind of showing you why they were, right? Honestly speaking, they are a legitimate contender. They've got great players on both sides of the football with Sean Wade on the defensive side, like Kid Hilliard, who's a stud. Their front 4 is legitimate. And then on the other side, you got Justin Fields, who showed why he was a Heisman contender early on, and Olave, Trey Sermon, who's actually their number 2 running back. That's the crazy thing, right? Master Teague is their number 1. Trey Sermon is now. I don't see how he can be unseated right now for the national championship game. But Trey Sermon, Chris Olave, Garrett Wilson. I mean, the list goes on, and they have the number 1 tight end recruit from last year on that team. I don't remember his name.
Jeremy Rucker.
Yeah, Rucker.
Rucker. Yeah.
So I mean, listen, that team is absolutely loaded. They deserve to be in the game as of right now. If you look at the landscape, of college football, Manny, yeah.
I don't think I'll ever be able to accept the amount of games they played. That's the thing that's gonna bug me.
That's fair.
Okay? If Florida was playing this national championship game and they only played 5 games in the SEC, I would have an issue because the whole point of a regular season is for you to go to the gauntlet. It's for you to go game by game. It's for you to make adjustments. Keep going. It's not to play 5 games and then say, well, we didn't play the other 5 because we couldn't play because of COVID. I understand that. But I still don't believe that still shows, yes, they have the better talent. They have the better coaching to me personally, too, on the field. Not saying that Nick Saban can't coach anymore, right? But to me, I feel like he's going up he's going up against a different type of monster on Monday night. It's hard. It's the Big 10, right? No, it's the Big 12. Like, you know what I'm saying?
Here's another thing, right?
Michigan just gave an extension to a coach that has not been
What the hell?
What the hell's going on?
What the hell? When I saw that, I go, that's a joke. That's got to be a joke.
You know Ohio State's going to run the table for years to come again with that, man. Like, you can't, again, going back to the topic so we don't get out of hand. I just feel like Ohio State, yes, they could have played still the 5 other games and still won the whole thing and still be in this position. But when you look on paper, they played 5 games. Everybody else had to go through the whole thing. Alabama had to go to Ole Miss and pull out a victory. Alabama had to play Florida for the title game and try to pull out a victory. Ohio State almost lost to Northwestern.
But here's the thing. But and when you say that, it makes total sense. And this is where I think the advantage, and I hate to say this, but this is where I think, believe it or not, Ohio State has the advantage. Thank you, Rob, by the way. Much love to you, brother. Look, this is where I think Ohio State has the advantage over Alabama. Ohio State is in game 8. They're just starting to hit, and then I said this last week, they're starting to hit their stride. They're starting, and they're healthy. They're still, and I know they've had COVID issues recently, but they're just starting to get their win, right? They had, a couple of games, whereas Alabama's already in game 13 or 14. This team is in game 8. So the advantage there as far as stamina, as far as things like that, I think Ohio State has the advantage in that, right? And that's where Manny, you make total sense. A team playing 6 or 7 games.
Jazz,
that's right. I don't think
Clemson looked tired.
Yeah,
Clemson looked slow.
They did.
I have never seen Clemson at halftime look like they needed freaking IVs all over the place. Yeah. Right? Like, I'm not, and plus they started off well, and so then all of a sudden you see their defensive guys can't tackle anybody. Their secondary all of a sudden gets exposed. Okay, Trevor Lawrence is trying to make plays out of the ordinary because nobody seems to be open. But it's like Ohio State's been sitting at home, man. They be hanging out and they go to practice on Zoom and go to practice at the facility and come home and be like, all right, I'm good.
Yeah,
Fresher legs, fresher legs.
Fresher legs. That's
fresher legs is the key, man. It's football. It's not soccer where you play 90 minutes and you get to, after the game, you do a hamstring little ice bag and what I'm saying? No, yeah. This is collegiate football where you go out there and you try the best you can, and every player does because they want to get drafted. You know what I'm saying? So you go out there, you played 60 minutes to the till. These guys have played 5 games and Alabama's played double of that. Like, you know what I mean? Like, it's not going to be a surprise to me if Alabama starts off fast, but at some point their legs are not going to be there. And Ohio State has just, mad athletes on that offensive side of the football that their legs right now are fresher than new kicks.
Yeah, no kidding, man. I think it's gonna be a fun game because at the end of the day, regardless of whether Ohio State has fresh legs or not, Alabama's still the best team in the country. So,
I agree.
So it's gonna be a good game. It's gonna be a battle. I don't think it's going to be a blowout by any stretch because I think a lot of people think Alabama's going to blow Ohio State out. I don't think so. I think Ohio State's much better than people think they are, and they're fresher. That's the biggest key. That they're fresher, their legs are fresher, and they're just hitting their stride. So they could catch Alabama off guard. They could catch Alabama tired, like they did to Clemson. And pull one out. You never know. And will there be an asterisk?
How I see though, Jazz.
There won't be an asterisk next to it, but there probably should be, right?
In the fourth quarter, this game's going to be close. Yeah. In the fourth quarter, this game is going to come down to who can scramble for that third down, who can create that third down stop. And I have a feeling that with Ohio State being as fresh as they are, they're going to be able to make that play.
Yeah.
So to me, Alabama has to go out there, guns blazing, man. Go out there, run the football, control the line of scrimmage, beat the other man across. And your defense, listen, their defense is good. It's not great.
Yeah.
I mean, Florida put all those points up without a running game. All right. And Kyle Pitts was getting covered mostly the whole game, and he still had a big game, right? So you know that Ohio State knows this with Wilson.
Look at all this.
I love Chris Olave, man.
Yeah,
that man right there is so smooth at running routes.
Yeah,
I mean, I know he don't get enough love because of course, Smith and whatnot, but man, Chris Olave to me, I would love to see him get passes thrown by Tua.
Danny, who do you think wins this game? Give me a score.
I think it's going to be Alabama. I think it's going to be Alabama 34-24. I think at some point Alabama's defense is going to be able to stop Ohio State. I will say it's going to be contingent on Trey Sermon. I think he's going to be the He ran for 183 yards last Saturday, and he really helped Justin Fields kind of balance the game a little bit. So if Alabama can stop Sermon with Fields coming off that injury, I think it's going to be tough for Ohio State. Yes, they have Wilson and Olave, but how far can that get them before the Alabama defense realizes that those are the two main and
Nick, Danny, great point, man. Because Nick Saban is going to have adjustments on the fly. You know that every single drive he sees that Ohio State offense on that field, him and his defensive staff, they're already once they get off the field, boom, 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 they switch it up. And how healthy is Fields, right? I mean, let's not kid ourselves. The man, listen, and I do feel bad for that Clemson linebacker, by the way. I mean, I don't know what else you wanted him to do.
I hate that rule. That's another show.
Yeah, okay, that's another show. But how healthy is he, man? Because if he's on 100%, you know they're going to want to run the football. That's the only way that you can create your balanced offense against the Nick Saban defense. So,
Manny, who do you think? What's the score? What do you got?
I'm going to go with Ohio State, man. To me, in the fourth quarter, Alabama might be up by 4 touchdowns. But if Fields is healthy and 100%, and if Sermon could at least run the football, and by I mean run the football, I mean they're not going to have the big running plays in the first half. It's once the game starts to roll, you head to the second half, the fresher leg type of talk that we've been having. You put that type of team against an Alabama team that's going to wear out a little bit. I have a feeling that that's going to be the case, man. And I can see Ohio State winning, I'm going to say 41-38.
I'm gonna say my score before Paul does, because I just realized that I ordered pub subs 15 minutes ago, and I gotta go get my pub subs, bro. I got my fiance over here kicking my ass about it already. So if Justin Fields is healthy, Ohio State squeaks one out and upsets Alabama 37-34. That's what I got. If not, if they get to Justin Fields early and hurt him or get him on his on the back of his feet, and make him make mistakes, because he'll throw you a couple picks if you put enough pressure on him, then Alabama's gonna go home with it. They're gonna roll, like this guy said. If not, Ohio State. See you guys later.
Enjoy your subs.
Thank you.
What's up, man?